Part 2 of this class on the Akshi Upanishad. Akshi referring to that Gyanachakshu, Krishna called it, or Thine Eye Be Single, where higher understanding of even something maybe beyond vision or beyond words occurs to the illumined soul. On the way becomes a sadhaka, as the 18th verse sloka says in this way. And we had examined 18, 19, 20, and we had found out that Samkriti, this ancient rishi, had learned from the sun god, Surya Narayan, that he's learning about the 7 stages of yoga. In a little different time than Patanjali was putting out the 8 limbs of yoga, and earlier than Lord Buddha was composing the Eightfold Path, the Ashtanga Marga. So this is very ancient, and in this Upanishad, and as we were saying earlier, comes from this Krishna Yajurveda. We trace it all, the Vedanta, tracing it all back to Upanishads, being the 4th part of the Vedas, or Anta, the end of the Vedas. And we had come to Surya Narayan's exposition on general non-attachment of 2 kinds. And we had worked through the first of these 4 stages, and I was telling you that the Jivan Mukti Viveka is usually taught to monks by senior monks, and it's hardly even found on the shelves of our books, but I think we do have, Ramakrishna Order put out one version of it, which we have here, if you want to look into it, but the teachings are, very much for monastics. And I said that I had found a few teachings in there that kind of bridged, you might say, the monastic and the forest dweller, or the being who has withdrawn from society but still lives on the fringes of it, if you might want to put it that way. Hard to do either of those nowadays with fences and barbed wire and population and everything. So it takes on an inner version. You have an inner sannyas, you have an inner forest dwelling. Maybe you can find a place of peace where you can practice it out externally too, if you're fortunate enough, like the way some of us are living in Hawaii in SRV, and having that life of peace and quiet there, relatively speaking. But we found out that the Jivan Mukti Viveka, Jivan Mukti is a living liberated soul, and Viveka means discrimination between the real and the unreal, or the essence and the non-essence, or the wheat and the chaff, if you want to put it that way, in more familiar terms. And so this great scripture is advising a quick path to renunciation. I'll show you a slower path to it, called yoga, when we look at Patanjali's seated samadhis next. I hope to get through both of these charts in this second half. But again, on your star map, it's the Akshi Upanishad, and it's verse 20 and 21 we're now putting our minds on. It's called manana. We found out to give up base desire of the sense objects. Probably we'd want to know that earth connects to smell, and water connects to taste, and fire connects to seeing, and the 5 senses and the 5 objects have an evolution from an involution out to an evolution by way of connection. They're not just random. So it would be the first thing you might call that Yoga 101, is to connect the elements to the senses. It's amazing how few people know that or make that connection in today's day and age. But making connections is what samanvaya is the Sanskrit word, is what that's all about. Connections that have become corroded, you might say. Like yesterday I was saying, you need to be kind of an inner electrician and go to find out where this corrosion has taken place between your nadis and your centers, and so that knowledge is not being transferred inward to your subtle body. And so you cannot connect a gross body with a subtle body. And we were studying Tripura Upanishad last week on retreat. It was being put in terms of Tripura's 3 cities. So you have an outer city, an inner city, and a transcendental city. And those are different than Bhur-Bhuva Swaha, who's making that distinction. They talk about the 3 worlds of transmigration. But when you come to Mother's outer city, you stop transmigration. And that's what this means here. Studies with an acharya and crosses transmigratory life. The first thing you would do, and the first thing that Jesus would teach the fishermen, the first thing that Shankara would teach his devotees, the first thing that Ramakrishna reminded the 16 direct disciples of, is this, wear this body no more, as Buddha said. This is the last time I'll wear this body. So if you want to be someone who works in the world for the good of the world, and if you do that dharmically, of course, then you would probably want to take that in. This is the last time I'll wear the body in ignorance, because Jivan Muktas and Bodhisattvas come back with higher knowledge already intact. And these connections, they don't have to remake them. The connections never got corroded, as if they were inner electricians and they were busy when they weren't in the body. That is actually after death, in a bardo beyond death, making sure that their rebirth is going to be accompanied like Shankara's was, with all knowledge. And you wouldn't have to come in here and know after. One of the 6 proofs of truth in Vedanta is knowing after. So everyone has to know after the fact. Nobody knows before, or very few know before. So it foists upon you the idea that you grow, which is not the truth. It forces upon you the idea that you've come into space, which is not the case. All space is within you. It gives you the idea that everything happens in time, which is not the case. All time is within you. Things that Swami Vivekananda was very good at explaining to us so that we could extract ourselves from the transmigratory process and put ourselves at Mother's feet. Tripura Sundari, the most beautiful one. And the best way to do that would be by the mantra. So as you use the mantra, you gain the higher desires. It says here, she says there, keep your higher desires, but make sure the desires that are base and gross are attenuated by you. So you don't want to end up being attached to the sense objects as your modus operandi in life, and to the things that the senses seek via the ego, really, your ego mind mechanism, which is unripe. So that would be Vishaya Vasana, as we say here, Vishaya Vasana. And give up your desire for the base senses and objects. Second would be Manasa Vasana. Manasa, of course, would be mind, and Vasana is desire. So it says, give up external desires of the mind. Give up internal desires of the mind. That's why soon I will show you what I wanted to show you earlier and mentioned the seated samadhis of Patanjali, because that's one way of doing it. The tantric way is to take all objects and deify them, turn them into manifestations of Brahman. And yoga's way is to meditate on them as alambanas. They're stations for meditation. So you meditate on earth, water, fire, air, ether, and you'd accomplish this meditation. And as you accomplished it, you'd get rid of your fear of water if you drowned in another lifetime, or your fear of fire if you burned or something. All the karmas are held in the connection between the 5 senses and the 5 elements. So you have to meditate on them so that, as she was saying in the last chart we took, that these connections to your ancestors, and these connections to the 5 senses, these connections to the transmigratory process are lit up and revealed. And then you can shine a light on them and make them go away. You won't hold them anymore, so then you won't hold the body anymore. So you'll wear the body for the last time. You might say, wear the body as with the thought that I am the body. And that's what you'll wear for the last time. And because you can take on a body like these great souls did, but you can always tell yourself, I am the Atman. I am Atman, all abiding. So anyway, this connection process has to start in terms of a krama mukti style, a gradual evolution of your spiritual consciousness, which of course doesn't make sense to the Advaitist, but nevertheless it makes sense to most people. So they have to move from the gross to the subtle. And the mind is the subtle body, sukshma rupa. And out here is the stula rupa. If you were all of a sudden to see that as Mother's two cities, you would not be a resident anymore in the transmigratory process. And that's so the first stage that he's telling you is get the teacher, hear the scriptures, and remember what when he reminds you, or she reminds you, that you shouldn't have fallen into any misfiance about the transmigratory process. I'm birthless, deathless, changeless, timeless, spaceless, whatever you need to hear, just to put that non-dual awareness in your wearing cloth, as Ramakrishna told Narayan, Swamiji. And then take it out if you ever have any doubts or if you ever have to explain it to somebody. That's the first thing you should know. Cut off the head and the tail and serve the body. But then later, you will have to, after you pass through this transmigratory process, karmas that we're talking about here, that at that time you have given up the outer for the inner. You've taken residence in a subtler city. You know that everything comes from the mind-only schools, whether you're Zen or Tibetan or Hindu or Jain, or you're going on this premise based in the mind-only schools, and you have your own way of thinking about that, and your own way of connecting the outer to the inner, so that you can connect, in Advaita speak, the waking to the dream state, like the dream I had night before last, where I went up into the stars, met a person that had died 2 years ago here on this planet, but was 22 years old in that realm, and I was talking to them. They were reborn in that realm. So as I went up in the stars, I don't believe in outer space and stars and all that. There's nothing up there. Then I realized I was in a dream, and I was viewing inner space. That those stars outside were the expression or manifestation of a source that was inside called star thoughts. You see, so a whole universe exists inside of you. And so that's a more broad way of explaining how you connect the waking to the dream state. Or you know, I mean, here they're talking about for monastics, you give up. If you have a problem with the sense objects, just give them up flat out, and then trace them to the mind and give them up there. It's a lot what Patanjali is saying when you have these different kinds of samadhi: savitarka, nirvitarka, savichara, nirvichara. First it's outer objects, and then it's inner objects. But he's going by the way of yoga, so he's wanting you to take them up as meditations, because probably if you're doing a practice, you're not ready for non-duality yet, as most people in the world aren't. So here in this Jivan Mukti Viveka scripture, you're ready for this, just give them up, let them go. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't connect them to their source, because they'll come back on you if you don't. You can say, I give it up, I give it up. Like I was mowing the lawn before I left Hawaii a couple of weeks ago. There's always this bush in the way, you see. So I try and go around it. It's got thorns, so it'll catch my shirt and scratch my skin and so forth. So I stopped the mower, and went this last time. I'd done it for the last time. I said, burn, bush, burn. Because I was thinking of Sri Ramakrishna's story. He said, if the bush harms you or is a botheration, you can't just yell at it, burn, bush, burn. You have to go get a fire and burn it. So I stood up the mower, walked back, 10-minute walk back to the house. It was a big piece of land. And I got a clippers, and I wanted to cut that thing right down. It was gone, no more botheration. So you have to, in this world, you have to take action to get rid of those impediments. And that would be based on connection, you see. So otherwise, in your mind, you're remembering every day this bush that come back. Every time you see the scratch on you and so forth, or it gets infected or whatever. And so in that way, give up the internal desires of the mind, and that would lead you then to the third state. It's really a simple teaching, but it's very straightforward in a society that doesn't like the word renunciation or tyaga. but they like to read the Gita. So Gita, 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 Gita. See, if you say Gita over and over again, what does it turn into? Tagi, renunciation. So they ask Ramakrishna, what's the real meaning of the Gita? Some people say it's works and karma, and other people say it's enlightenment, and other people say it's other things. He said, that's just what you get when you repeat the word 6 or 8 times. That's the meaning of the Gita. Gita, 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 Gita. Turns into Tagi, which is the Sanskrit word for renunciation. So Krishna is pretty much telling Arjuna on the battlefield, guess what? You've got all these karmas upon you. You're depressed. The cookie has crumbled so that you're going to have to go against war with your ancestors, or some of them are on the other side of the battlefield. So, this is what you've gotten into as a course of Maya, desires, transmigration, and trying to live the good life. So, as the scripture itself says, renounce first the desire for enjoyment, then the inner mental desires that foster it. Keep the pure desires, such as the desire for friendship. Then practice giving those up too. You have to give up your friends. Now, I've seen that with the monks, and I've seen that with society, householders. You give somebody the mantra and the teachings, and the person is like a stockbroker, and he's going out with his friends drinking once a week and so forth. And then he comes to me and says, I didn't want to do that anymore. I don't want to go out drinking. I don't like that kind of life, but my friends are giving me up. See, they're calling me saying, why aren't you out drinking with us tonight? See? So he had to lose his friends. Now in the case of Ramakrishna's disciples, Sangha and Asanga, you see, the monk, the sannyasin, shouldn't have any attachment to anyone, not even his brother monks. So they had a great love for each other. And then Sri Ramakrishna passes, and they go wandering. And they're without each other for months at a time. Then somewhere in India they meet, you see, at some village or city or in the Himalayas, and they just love each other. They just, clasp each other, and then they're off wandering again, not thinking of each other anymore. So that's this kind of giving up of the ties of friendship that happen. Is really not all that hard for us to understand, because even your children, when they're out of sight, they're out of mind. Or at least it used to be that way. Now they've got cell phones, and you've got connections up to the baby's crib from the first floor. If it cries, you run up there. So everything is based in this kind of stress of loss and losing, you see. And, as if I'm not a free soul. If these things that I'm worried about are real when they're not. I shouldn't be fretting about them. I shouldn't have stress and worry. Somebody told me the other day, I said, I saw you 2 months ago and you were shining. What happened? and he said, I'm just stressed out right now, Babaji. I'm stressed out. I thought in my mind, why? Why did you let yourself get in that condition? That's not noble. The Atman doesn't get stressed. Why should you? So, yeah, chit happens, as we say in Vedanta. So, all of these things come around. What comes around goes around, and you have to keep your balance, in that battle. And that determines whether or not you have mastered the gunas, the sattva guna or not, if you can stay in balance when things that are untoward are happening to you. So the scripture is saying, fair faces and false hearts. See, friends who are friends give you up. Students who are students betray you. Wives and husbands who loved you don't love you anymore. Children who were good once turn evil and cause trouble with the neighbors. I mean, the scriptures are full of those kinds of descriptions. The Gospel of Ramakrishna is full of those kinds of descriptions. It's just all a testament on the nature of change, constant change that's going on. And the Atman that's changeless should be the witness of all of that and remain unaffected. That's your test right there, whether you're a monk or householder. Probably the householder has a harder time of it. Sri Ramakrishna described the householder in that Ramakrishna Stories book. He says that basically man is walking across the city. Let's say Calcutta. That's a nice city to walk across. And he's got this big weight on his shoulder. Then he comes to a marriage processional, so he has to stand there. So everyone stops and watches this beautiful marriage procession, elephants and everything possible out there going by. And everyone's watching it and having a good time, and then basically the processional goes by and everyone goes back to their business. So that man with the weight on his shoulder is the householder. He watches the beauty of everything too, but he has to bear the weight of householding. And the others who don't have that weight are like monks. They don't have that weight. They don't have to carry anything around. So we might want to ask ourselves, how do we become dharmic householders and not carry any weight around anymore? Shed it. Is this teaching only for monks? As the Swami told me once, don't teach this to householders. Or is there a place where you become a vanaprasthan or a forest dweller, where you don't consider yourself, like Hassanamalaga said, I'm neither warrior nor merchant nor wanderer nor householder nor monk. I'm Chidananda Rupaha. I'm Shiva. Or I am the essence, the Swarupa of everything, unchanging and unaffected. So if you can see through the bonds of family and friendship and still conduct yourself in a way that you know that it's for the sake of the Atman in the family, you love the family, not for the sake of the family, then, as Yajnavalkya tells us in his Upanishad, then you would proceed on to this pranava, or pranaya, you see, vasana. Give up social relations and cultivate knowledge alone. So that's again what happened to the wandering monk, and what happened to some of my students who got beyond friendships that were binding them to the world, and decided not to go to parties anymore. So, I think the last party I went to was when I was in high school, and didn't like it. That was here in Portland, actually. And I used to tell people in prison, I'd go into prison and teach, you see, and used to tell people in prison, I could go into the women's prison up there, you see, in Wilsonville. And, I lived like 10 miles down the road off of Haynes Exit, up in the southwest. So I would tell them, is the world real? And they'd say, oh yeah, we think it's real. And I said, well, it's sort of like Haynes Exit back there, you see. I lived in a house there, and I had parents, and I was raised with a family of 4 children and so forth. And all that's gone now. House is gone, family's gone. Is that your version of reality? You see, that everything can just go away like that, and you call it real? So, it's the same with social relations and family. They're just passing phenomena. And the essence is what you want out of it. You want to stay in constant awareness of the unchanging essence of a thing. It's not that hard a teaching. And like the paper bag I saw yesterday, it just said Simple Truth on it. Must be some organization here in Portland, Simple Truth. Walk around with a bag. You should carry the Simple Truth with you everywhere, is what I was thinking. That I am Atma Brahma, that the self is Atman, one with Brahman. So it's a little bit humorous here. It says, give up social relations and cultivate knowledge. And then the next state, which is Vidyavasana, give up knowledge. Give up knowledge, and then give up that by which you renounce. So it's back to this sloka we had here. Enjoyments and non-enjoyments are dread diseases. They're not just enjoyments that are diseases. Non-enjoyments are also diseases. Possessions are great disasters. All contacts just promote separation. And suffering is just the disease of your thought. So anything that promotes separation, you move to strike that line. There should be no line of demarcation between matter and spirit, God and mankind, creature and creator. No line of demarcation whatsoever, because there is none. Maya matramidam, Dvaita Advaita Paramataha, Shankara says in his scripture. So I see no distinction between between God and mankind, creature and creator, and probably Brahman and Maya. See, because Maya is just poison in a snake. It's got to have a source, so it too is in Brahman. But Brahman's not affected by Maya like a snake's not affected by its own poison. So this is the way to the bell fruit. You see the whole thing, not just the flesh, but the seeds, the skin, the stem, as Sri Ramakrishna would tell by way of story. So if you want another version on that, Sri Krishna tells Arjuna, get this knowledge, first action, and then action is not enough unless it gives you knowledge. If you give knowledge, then you can either get rid of action or do it properly. Right orientation, right action, eightfold path kind of thing. But then after you get knowledge, you must give it up in truth. Why? Because knowledge is dangerous if it doesn't lead to truth. And there you have the Western society. It's stopped at intellectual knowledge. And what a danger it is to everyone now, with its desire to dominate and the power that it has in its hands. And so you would want to go beyond that kind of knowledge, not keep it, hold it, possess it. So renunciation isn't just a sort of special quality for the monastic. It's something very much applicable, I think, to people of all walks of life. Sri Ramakrishna put it very nicely. The monk renounces internally and externally, but the householder has to renounce internally. He has to know this is all a play, a show, a dream, and be the great actor, be the great pretender, and be the great enjoyer, knowing that it's all unreal. You raise your family knowing that's unreal. You go to your job knowing that's unreal. And the reality is something that's beyond Maya and outside of change. You seek the immutable and give up the mutable. So finally, if you even give up the desire for knowledge, you abide in what remains, called truth, and then give up that by which you renounce. So you're a shesha, like my teacher, no residue left from the process, because all processes were unreal. They were dreams that your ego undertook. They weren't anything your Atman participated in. All action takes place in nature, not in the soul. So the soul is actionless, pure and perfect. The simple truth, carried around on your shopping bag if you want. Now some quotes in this chart, and we'll look at the yogas of samadhi to end the class. This is from Lord Vashishta. He says, the beginner should fill 2 parts of the mind with objects of enjoyment, 1 part by study of scriptures, and 1 part by attending on the teacher. So for the beginner, you've got to keep some enjoyment there. You can't just rip it out by the roots, you see. So I've got my enjoyment of certain things. It's sort of these quotes, I sort of mating them up with these stages. Because Lord Vashishta was telling this to a 14-year-old boy named Sri Ram Chandra. Then the intermediate student should fill 1 part of the mind with objects, 1 part by reflecting on the scriptures, 2 parts by attending on the teacher. So you see how this shift is taking place here. You see, objects took away 1 part of the objects and I put that with the teacher. You see, so now I'm going to hear the teachings of the Dharma about detachment, non-attachment, renunciation, bliss, and all the other peace of mind and all those other things that the objects were not able to give me and actually were responsible for my lack of peace. Should I be himsa or should I be ahimsa? It's the first tenet of yoga. You should be ahimsa. And it's why Buddhism went all over the world without raising a sword or a finger, when all the other religions had to proselytize and try and conquer by weapons and war. It's because they were nonviolent. And they learned it from the Jains. I mean, how far back does Jainism go before Buddha? 24 generations? 24 Tirthankas of Jainism before, which ended in Mahavir. And that's a long, long time to be nonviolent and to practice strict nonviolence. There's nothing to laugh at. You know, the Westerns, oh, don't kill a moth or this and that, you see. It's something to actually use as an ideal, maybe to make yourself less violent, or try and convince your society to be less violent, to proceed by dharma. It's the first yama of yoga. So if you don't believe that suffering is in the fabric of things, then you can't be a Buddhist, because that's the first noble truth. So I would say you can't be a yogi if you don't believe that, or don't practice ahimsa, which is the very first thing out the door in yoga. And besides, you get silence from ahimsa. You get restlessness from himsa. See? Isn't it? First doorway to yoga, according to Shankara, is silence of tongue, mouth, and mind. And you can't have that if you're violent. You're thinking about all sorts of ways to be more violent. You've agreed somewhere inside yourself that violence is okay. Doesn't it sound like us in the West here? That we can somehow condone this somehow? What's going on? Even against enemies? Be the same to enemies, neutrals, and friends, arbiters, Krishna says in the Gita. So that's why you'd want to get this knowledge before you give it up. So we know that the beginner has two parts of the mind on enjoyment, one part on study, because that's going to start to take his mind off of the necessity for enjoyment. I think I enjoy study now, you see. I'm going to go up there on that skiing trip, or I'm going to go hiking, or I'm going to do this or that. Well, I think maybe I'll spend a little more time studying. Or I'll go hiking and study on the hike. I'll ski down the mountain with a scripture. I mean, I used to do that, not with a paper scripture, but I would ski down Mount Hood there thinking of the Dharma. One person was with me once on a ski trip, and I came out of the lodge. They told me this later and said, you know what you said to me back then when you came out of the lodge with the skis over your shoulder? What did I say? I said, oh, Mother's white today. So I was seeing everything as Divine Mother. The snow was Mother, the mountain was Mother. And that was back in my 30s, you see, when I still could ski without breaking my damn full neck. So study of scriptures is going to attenuate that desire for enjoyment. It's good for you. It's good for you. I mean, the Ramakrishna order, the Swamis have told me at Advaita Ashrama, well, we're selling more books. Great. And then they come back a couple years later, well, you know, the scriptures aren't selling very well anymore. They're not selling. Oh, that's too bad. You see, so people are looking into these great scriptures that the Ramakrishna order is putting out in an unprecedented flow in all of history. These scriptures are now being put into so many different languages and are available to people in very good translations. It's coming ebb and flow. You see, sometimes they'll spend some time and other times they won't. But there's no doubt about it that when you walked in here today, you walked into an ashram with a rishi sitting here teaching about the ancient Dharma. Could it be said otherwise? So does time really exist in the Dharma? I talk to people in high school classes. Say, why are you here still? Why are you here? You cracked that book last lifetime. You got that degree 2 lifetimes ago, and you're still doing it? All knowledge lies within you. When are you going to make that connection? And leave the school behind, leave knowledge behind, and get the truth. What to say? It's habit. It's a long-standing habit with our ancestors in Bhur Bhuva Swaha and back, or Muladhara to Swadhisthana to Manipura and back. The advanced student should fill half the mind with the study of the scriptures, and then the remaining half with worship of the teacher. So that's what happened to be with Swami Sheshananda. See, I would tend upon him, hear everything he had to say, and until he was in his 90s, he was still giving lectures on the podium when he couldn't see or hear, and they'd have to conduct him down off of the dais, and if you bowed at his feet, he wouldn't know what was happening. You see, when he did know what was happening, you'd bow at his feet and he'd go, "That's all right. not necessary. You're a Westerner. You don't have to do that. You see. So the Hindus would all go running to his feet, and he'd go, "Oh, okay, all right." See, because that was in their custom, their tradition, and they knew something we didn't, that you get blessings like that. So if you fill half the mind with study of the scriptures, then you've got Lord Vashishta and other great rishis on your side. You see, you can join the ranks of Brahman, of knowers of Brahman, as the Upanishads say. Become one with them, and until you are, follow the way of the tradition. That's one thing Swami Sheshananda yelled at us in his ashram. Follow the tradition. You could hear it echoing through the halls. He's just a little man, not even 5'10" or 5'8", but boy did he have a voice. I saw him scream at my brother once, and my brother's hair actually danced, you see, from the breath. And he was like, 2 feet up above him, 6'2". You see. Get out of this place, he said. And Steve's hair went. The last quote here, then, is raising an opposite wave in the mind, called pratipaksha bhavanam, is a much overlooked and underestimated method of spiritual practice. It is the simple way of watering the flowers and not the weeds. Here, the aspirant does not strive to root out desires, does not strive to squelch emotions, does not have to destroy the passions or force austerities upon himself. Instead, he slowly transforms the mind by fixing it on the dharma and the teachings. So you just have to hear the truth in Vedanta, and everything will fall in the right place. And this forcing idea, maybe for stronger souls, monks and so forth, maybe they will do that because they've done it before. I remember how to do that, you see. But in people who have had many lifetimes with their ancestors, trying to get to show them the virtues of dharma and everything, it has to be krama mukti. It has to be up by stages, by avastas. Introduce it to them, let them get used to it. And if I've learned anything of teaching dharma to Westerners as a Westerner, although I don't really consider myself one, I've learned that, how it has to be a slow, patient, gradual process. And so therefore I have my ideal. Sri Sharda Devi, I'd say that she's probably the most current example of the middle path that Buddha taught before Buddhism went, into the greater vehicle and so forth. And Krishna taught in the Gita too, very much from the middle path. There was not a lot of extremes there. It was just a statement of fact, what is, and you cut your teeth on it, and you remembered your true nature. And in a time that was so ancient like that, you were closer to the source. Now, in the time remaining, which is about, I think, 20 minutes, with this in mind of how to renounce in 4 stages, which is just a simple, quick teaching that if you had the ability and the wherewithal inside of you, you could do this in a short amount of time. And that's probably why Vivekananda told us, if you practice this dharma, this yoga, you should be able to become enlightened in 6 months. You see. So he means somebody who's really adept at it, probably already has the memory of it close at hand, hears the truth and begins to work. You should return yourself to your original state in 6 months, he said. And he wasn't a person that advised quick paths. Not like some of these teachers out there who are materialists, spiritual materialists and things. They're advising that you get this kind of Sputnik samadhi, out of wealth and those things, when those are the very things you should be renouncing in order to get true samadhi. So Vivekananda nevertheless did make that stark statement about being able to awaken quickly. You don't want to hang out in Maya too long, because what was auspicious a couple of weeks ago could turn very unauspicious next week, and put your mind ill at ease. Disease is just dis-ease. You don't have ease anymore. Somebody once told me, you see. So I'm saying, by way of comparison and contrast, the yogic way here would be less terse, you see. And if you were fortunate enough to have Patanjali as your teacher, he was probably about 140 AD. So 600 years after Buddha, 140 years after Christ, and some 600 years before Shankara. So, and coming out with his most recent version of yoga, because yoga had been there forever in India. And so many versions of it, like back to Vishishta Yoga, for instance. So the eight-limbed yoga, the Ashtangika yoga, or Ashtanga yoga, so much like Buddha's Ashtangika Marga. So you read the Yoga Sutras, and they really smack a lot of Lord Buddha's teachings in the Dhammapada and so forth. So his way of saying this could be all focused around one word, alambana. You should be taking all of this as supports. Now, I said supports for meditation, that is. You shouldn't just be taking it for granted. You see, oh, here I've got my couch, I've got my food, my refrigerator, and I'm having enjoyments. Just, exactly the point. You should be taking these as all. If you were tantric, you'd say, this is, a manifestation of Brahman, I have to deify it. So you'd be purifying your food. Your energy would get pure. It would come up the spine. It would awaken the centers. And you'd have pure prana. They call that mukhya prana in India. And that would be your tantric kundalini way of refining everything, if you're a tantricist. So if you're a yogi, then a little bit different emphasis would be, yes, be nice if you deified it, but Patanjali did not mention God, and he did not mention Mother, and he did not think that you had to believe in divine reality. There's only, in all of the slokas, there's only one mention of Ishvara. Oh, Ishvara, yes, that's this extremely unique soul, he says in the sloka. That's all he says. And he only mentions mantra once. Whereas in Tantra, and pretty much in Vedanta, you're using the mantra all the time. So in that way, what is an alambana? It's a support for meditation. So in a way, it kind of affects the same end as Tantra. Is that, you could be looking at it as divine, everything, every little thing, looking in every nook and cranny for Brahman hiding from you, you see. But why not just take the thing in and of itself and meditate it as a support for Brahman? So if I did that with, say, Earth. So I'm going to have to take Earth. How many continents are there? What's in Earth? How many different kind of organisms are in Earth? Landslides. You go all over with Earth in your mind and think about Earth. Earth, Earth, Earth. It can be your meditation for days or a week. And then, where's the cause of Earth is what this is leading you to. So you're not going back in time to a Big Bang for this, because Earth always exists. And the Earth up there existed long before the Big Bang that caused this world and this universe. There are other universes too, like the stars I saw in my dream 2 nights ago. So you have to go inward for this. So you're taking it as an alambana for what? Basically your dreams. And this is where people sometimes say, oh, well, I'm a Sufi or I'm a Muslim, you see, so dreams are really big to us. Well, good for you. I'm glad, and dreams are a great signposts and all that, so why don't you have them in Vedanta? I said, well, we have them in yoga and in Advaita, because you've got 3 states of consciousness, and it's called waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. And these are levels of your consciousness. These aren't just something to be left out of the quotient. A, U, and M means waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. The word. It all comes out of the word. So you can, Tantra, Yoga, Vedanta, Buddhism, they all have a very close association with the word. And Jesus had it too. In the beginning was the word. And it was with God, and it was God, he said. So 3 different things about the word he had to say. That sounds like A-U-M to me, and it sounds like waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. And it sounds like if you leave these 3 disconnected, that you wander the worlds without knowing who you are, where you're going, where you came from. That was Pipalada's conclusion. He was a great rishi that you don't hear much about, Pipalada. But he said, if you don't connect the 3 matras of the Om, then you wander the worlds, and you become a nervous wreck. you be reborn again and again in the outer world only, and you believe that you're a body, and you believe that the world is real, and you believe that the five elements are real, and the five senses should attach to the elements so that they can get pleasure with the objects. That's what you believe. A materialist isn't even half the problem, because if you fall back from materialism, you're a hedonist then. See? And you're trying to get all sorts of very strange pleasures out of the objects. And it's all leading you down a dark road. Sevenfold road to ruination, Krishna says in the Gita. Sevenfold road to ruination. So what's the solution then for that? Is to consider your dreams as the kingdoms of heaven within you. You actually go there at night. That's where your father didn't die. That's where someone who had a lifetime out here was reborn there to live in heaven for a while, so that before their karmas pulled them back, you're pretty much in knowledge of the inner dynamics of the transmigrating soul in Maya. And you can do this all from a witness standpoint. You don't have to actually involve yourself in it. In fact, that's what most people have done. In order to study it, they've involved themselves in it. So when they're in it, they don't know. Like fish don't know they're in water. They don't know you're in Maya. There's no word for it in this culture. So if a rishi all of a sudden, if one fish all of a sudden said, I think water exists, it'd be like a rishi saying, oh, guess what, we're all in Maya. And there's a state beyond Maya I saw last night. How could I see it? Because I was neither in waking nor was I in dream. I went into what's called deep sleep. And when I kept this eye open in deep sleep, I saw the seeds to dreaming and waking right there. That I fashioned everything out of seeds. And every forest out here, every child, every baby that's born in the hospital, and every fruit tree, every watermelon particularly, is telling you everything comes from seeds. And you're not listening to nature. So back to my point, if you have a seated samadhi, pun intended, if you have seated samadhi, then you're encountering objects as on the outer level. That's called vichara, or savichara, and savi, and nirvichara. So first you're encountering objects outward, but you're using them as a lambanas. Since that exists, so does this. Since if there's smoke on yonder hill, there must be fire. If there's a creation, there must be a creator. Where's the source to this? Or how did solidity happen? See, Earth is just solidity, right? It started out as a thought solidity in God's mind. It became solid on the waking state. So now you have something, solid. Everyone wants something solid. They don't know that it's all shifting particles. It's all sand. It's all atomic particles changing at a billionth of a second. They still think it's solid, so, seaman gets off the sea and becomes a landlubber, you see, because of solidity. And then there's liquidity, and then there's visibility. See, these are called tanmatras, and that's where you connect next. Objects to senses to tanmatras. And Vivekananda said, you don't know anything in this country about prana or about tanmatras. You've lost these two essential pieces in the Adidaiva Vidya, the original divine knowledge, which was Kapil's business to give you long before probably even Vashishta was on earth. Kapila came forth with that system. So if you've lost those essential things, how can you meditate on them? How can you connect them inward? So you try and connect inward and you make it about as far as your ancestors. See? But anything deeper than that is short-circuited to you. You can't get to the realm of the devas and devis. You can't get to the realm of the rishis. You can't get to the realm of the Trinity. And that goes on so long that pretty soon there's only, in India, there's only 3 centers. And these centers are not known anymore. So Mahachamasya comes along at some age, meditates, all of a sudden the center opens for him. Wow! Bhur Bhuva Swaha Mahar, you see. We rediscovered the 4th level of existence. It wasn't that he fashioned it or something. It was there all the time, but it was covered over to our understanding. te dhyan yoga, nugata pasyan, devatma shaktim svagunayar nagudam, yaha karnani nikilani tani, kalatma yuktanya adidishtat yekaha, Setashvatara Upanishad says. Basically, we went inside and practiced the yoga of meditation, and we saw the Devatma Shakti, Divine Mother, Tripura. She had been covered before by her own modes of nature, but she revealed herself to us. We couldn't see her because of the limitations of our own intellects. But when we refined our intellects, if you want to go back to that chart, you see, make sure you hone the intellect. Holy Mother said in this chart, see, make sure you hone the intellect in your practice. So when our intellects got refined, then we saw her. So that's what happened to Mahachamasya. He says, just like Samkriti is getting the knowledge of Brahmavidya from the sun god here at a certain age. In another age, people ought to discovered the 3 matras of Om and connected them. In another age, then Mahachamasya came forward and had a vision of the heart chakra, which India even was not even thinking about anymore, because of the long efflux of time that had covered everything over. So this re-revelation all the time is happening to people who keep their mind on the Dharma lifetime to lifetime. They keep it fresh. So in Patanjali, you had a difficult time. You see, 140 AD, Buddhism was beginning to fail when it had its heyday. Shankara was not yet on the scene with his teachers, Gaudapada and Govindapada, to resurrect the Advaita Vedanta, which was this non-dual truth. So there he has a way of looking at people, and he says, in this day and age, the seer has become attached to the seen. And this is asked backwards. It should be the otherwise, And he didn't probably know yet that we were going to be focusing on TVs all our lives, and cell phones and things. That's deeper Maya in the future. I just have to get them to reverse the process here and turn the vision inward to the original. There's a song in India, you're focusing on the false self, turn instead to the original, the fountain of delight, the bridge to immortality. And you do that in one place. You open your inner eye, you look inward. So alambanas then would be ways of doing that. If I meditated on earth, then I would have to see them. Eventually I'd ask the question, where did it come from? Because I see so many earths out there, and so many suns. See, it's all confusing out there. But it's not so confusing inside. When I go inside and I see it for myself, that from the internal, the external has come. And being infinite, only infinite remains. It's all one reality, without divisions, because he's telling him here, the sun god, separations are a problem. All contexts promote separation. So you believe in separation. Nations, people, pretty soon you can't even put together the 5 senses. You're running along one avenue, and the other 4 kind of take a back seat, you see. So I need to make these connections of earth to smell and the power of smelling, and from water to taste and the power to taste, seeing and the power to see with fire. This is all very significant. See, this is all fraught with meaning that's been long ago forgotten, and the connections have been forgotten. So I need a great teacher, Samanvaya, to bring it together for me again, point me in the right direction so I can re-envision this. If I think it, it must be so, Vivekananda said. And nothing can keep me. I'll know whatever bugaboo is here in the world, and I'll get rid of it. See, that has to do with what I wanted to get to, called Vedantic lion taming. You see, the kitty is looking in the mirror and seeing a lion, you see. So this is Vivekananda's Vedantic lion taming, how to make you again into who you really are. We'll get to that in January when we come back. So with a few minutes left, enough to say, because we'll probably start with this in January, Savitarka and nirvitarka, and savichara and nirvichara are seeded samadhis. They found this image of seeds being spread all over, you see, by the gardener's hand, as it were. And so samadhis and special moods are there to be had in droves for the person who will only take that inward turn and become interested in the source of things. And in the meantime, before the source is seen, start to inspect origins. Utpatti is a Sanskrit word. That was a special teaching of Lord Vashishta. Utpatti, you must, find the cause of that effect. And then when you find the cause to that, you can't be satisfied. That cause is the effect of some other cause. And so you've got this, some 40 or 45 different paths in India, like Shristi Stitivada and other paths, that talk about causes and effects. And that's where Vedanta and Samkhya, these two bookends of India, really began to agree with each other for the most part, is that everything's based on cause and effect here, and you're only seeing the physical cause to any given thing, and you're satisfied with that. So don't be satisfied. Don't let that wool be pulled over your eye. Make the connections back to a subtle state. First the object outward. See, what does it say there? The condition of savitarka is accompanied by gross thought, focused on names and forms, mixed with the gunas, and shadowed by doubt. See? So that sounds like most people's world of objects. The aim there, if you want to get rid of that, Patanjali says, refine concentration by focusing on objects, names and meanings, so as to lead a fuller, lead to fuller comprehension. So you need deeper understanding about the object and what it means, and where its origin is, because you've been told different things by 7-day creation theory and 4 billion, 320 million year evolutionary theory, and all these things are not doing it for you. But you've also heard all kingdom of heaven lies within you, all knowledge lies within you, and the source of everything is deep in your consciousness. You are the source of all that, not God. God is the sourceless source, you see. He's the unmoved mover. He's not even a he, so it's hard to talk about it. See? It's the uncaused cause. It's the unstruck sound. I mean, so you have to think about Brahman all as something very, very unique and of its own. The method then would be to strive via basic knowledge to comprehend the world, the deities, and the 16 Visheshas. It's where we get into our next retreat on yoga, which people are asking me to have the 8-limbed yoga and talk about the Visheshas. And, basically, the elements and the senses, and the pranas and the body and so forth. And then you get to the avisheshas, which more has to do with mind and prana. Finally you get beyond that to the bliss of the ego, and then finally you get even beyond the ego, and that's these 4 kinds of samadhi, as he lists them in a nutshell. You have to run it forward real quick here. We'll explain some of it later, with the condition, the aim, and the method for all of them. And then the process of how this happens. How you give up even knowledge to get to truth, and then you give up even giving up to get beyond, would be called nirodha in yoga. Any word that starts with NIR, you should probably take a big interest in it. Nirvana, nirvikalpa, nirbija, seedless. That means something has been made back to its original state. It's been made extinct because it never existed in the first place. So in your mind, you have that nirlambana. Pretty soon there's not even any supports for Brahman. You realize it's supportless. And you should try and be that same way yourself, only depending upon the indivisible self within. Om Sato Om Sato Ma Sadgamoya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamoya Mrichor Ma Amritam Gamaya Abira Bira Mayedi Rudrayate Dakshinamukam Tenamam Pahinicham Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from darkness to light, from lower truth to higher truth, from the unreal to the real, and from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.